Welcome back. In this episode, we are going to be talking about redefining what success looks like for women. So really stepping out of your traditional kind of like masculine success models and entering more a new way of living life in alignment, but also doing business in your way and more of like a feminine way, right? If we can just look at how career or success has looked like in, let's say, the corporate world for men for a very long time, because I mean, it's obviously dominated by men, right? It was always set up in a way where, they would like really hustle until like 4 p.m. At 4 p.m., they'd have their like cocktail hour, 4 to 6 o'clock, right? And then they would end the day, right? Now, if we look at that from a biological point of view, it's very much because men wake up every single morning. They have a 24-hour cycle. They produce testosterone, a lot of testosterone, so they can hustle and really work hard. And around 4 p.m. is when estrogen starts to kick in. And estrogen is the socializing hormone, right? So that's when they would have the cocktail hour. That's when they would socialize with other men, talk about their business deals, right? And all of that. And then they would end the day. While for women, as I'm sure you're aware, we have a whole month cycle, right? So it's not an everyday reset button. It changes throughout the month constantly, right? Through our 4 different phases, right? And so we still very much, women, feel the pressure to work according to that cycle. And I realized this, and I started really looking into this when I noticed that I was constantly getting burnt out, constantly. My body was constantly suffering through different immune system related issues, whether that was like my lips like swelling up to this size, maybe I can like attach a photo here, where with like sore, like hundreds of sores everywhere, to like constantly getting colds like 10 times a year, to just like having like really severe symptoms during my periods. All kinds of things like were happening, right? And it was a combination of that and also getting pregnant that I realized like there is no way that this is the only way to do business and to live life and to even make money, right? So thanks to my pregnancy, like with my first pregnancy, I continued to develop these like burnout symptoms. And before giving birth, I asked myself, like, how do I want my life to look after this, after having the baby, right? And of course, I realized, like, I had an idea that I'd be able to, like, work the same amount of hours or kind of and have help with the baby. But once I had the baby, like, everything changed. Once I had Sophia, everything changed. Like, in the first 2 weeks after having her, I was like, I don't want to work anymore. All my hormones were like flooding in, my oxytocin, like all I wanted to do was be with my baby. And I was like, oh shit, like I was getting doubts about like whether I even need to do my business, whether I even need to make money, and like all these things, when before I was so driven and I was like, no, like I need to do this, right? Like I want to do this, I wanted to do it, right? And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna accept that this is just a phase in my life right now. And like a month after giving birth, I was like, okay, I wanna get back into this. Like I miss working with women, right? But I wasn't sure what that would look like. And my biggest struggle at this point was, how do I felt so much pressure and overwhelm in my body because I was trying to take how I ran my business before having the baby and copy paste it to after having the baby. And all my problems were coming from this simple thing. And what I realized is that I had to create an identity shift. I had to now run my business as the mother, right? As a person who's not just a woman, but also a mother, right? And as part of this identity and creating this new identity, I don't have a lot of hours in the day to work, right? I can't work in this 24-hour cycle way, right? Even like before, I didn't really work that way, but I was trying to. I felt the pressure to constantly work in this 24-hour cycle. At this point, I had this huge realization where I was like, oh my gosh, like what if I can make the same amount of money, but working way less around my baby's clock, right? And this sounds like the most obvious thing, but the fact is that when you're in this resistance, when you're in this non-acceptance of this new reality, it's very difficult to make that transition, right? So as I start to accept this new reality, I realized that in this phase of life, I'm gonna work in the evenings sometimes. That's okay, no pressure, right? I'm gonna work while my baby naps, right? That's okay, no pressure. And what I start to discover is that in the 30-minute nap, I got 12 things done, which before the baby, I could never do that in 30 minutes, right? So I rediscovered a new way of working by channeling my intuition, channeling my impulses. So I would channel specific ideas. They would just come to me, and this would happen actually during breastfeeding. So as I would lay down and breastfeed my baby, I started to get I would get impulses like, what about a program called da da da? And then I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I'd quickly have my notes app nearby and write it all down, right? And after a few months, I was like, this is happening every time I breastfeed. So there must be something happening here, right? I must be connected to source more than ever. And I must be channeling something, because there is no way that these are just random thoughts, right? Because they were always very specific and they always created excitement in my body. So what I started doing is I started following these ideas. And every single time I followed this idea, I got so much momentum. I gained new clients. I, attracted so much more money. And I was like, wow, by following these ideas, I'm cutting down my work time by so much, in 4 times basically, right? And so I started working this way, and I was like, wow. So if we actually, as women, use our creativity, if we use our power of intuition, if we use our womb wisdom, right, to create things, and out of our innate value, that can inherently be exchanged for money, right? So because we are so valuable, because our intuition is so valuable, whatever we create as a byproduct will be so valuable, and as a result, whatever is so valuable can be exchanged for money, right? So I stopped seeing work as work where I have to hustle and have all the priorities right, and all these concepts that we're taught from this masculine world, all the strategies, and if the strategies are not right, nothing's gonna work, right? And I started prioritizing truly this more feminine nature, this more feminine side. It felt so much more free and soft. And even as you can see, how my body changes when I talk about this, that's really what it feels like. It feels softer, it feels more nurturing, and it feels like it's meant to be, right? It feels like having a baby, basically, every time you have an idea, right? So this is how I discovered for myself that there's a whole new world out there in terms of how you can work, and that women are really not meant to be working in the same way as men, even just for, just biological reasons, right? One quick note I want to make about how I just talked about the masculine ways of doing things with the strategies and this very kind of a linear way of doing things is that it's not bad. It's not a negative thing. What I want to say is that it's not the whole way of doing things as a woman, right? And so, of course, it is beautiful to have those masculine strategies and systems to hold the container, but within the container we can flow, right? And so what I see a lot of the time is that, let's say, the feminine is the flowy energy, right? It's being creative and intuitive and just kind of going with the flow. And as I said, having ideas, inspiration, and just going for those ideas, right? And the masculine is more the container. So in a way, kind of like a glass. And once you have this glass, right? And once that's secure, within that, you can flow as much as you want. So we do still need the masculine and the feminine, right? And we need to have a balance of those. But especially in motherhood, it really, really helps to have that support of the masculine systems. So just to translate this to the digital world, let's say a system would be, let's say, an automation, right? So instead of having to email someone welcome to my program or whatever 150 times, you would have an automation that would do that for you, right? So that would be a system. That would be the masculine side of things, right? However, I don't believe in over-relying on systems, and that is not what will make or break your success or your business, right? What will, though, make or break your business is your trust internally, your trust in your ideas, and your courage, your bravery, and ability to go after them, right? Because once you know what you want to go after, once you trust that everything that comes out of your beautiful mind is meant to happen, once you have trust in that, setting up the system, having the masculine side is very easy to do, right? We all know how to do things, right? For me at that point, my life was very much like, because I first discovered this flow, this new way of doing things, I was very much flowing, especially because my baby was like a newborn and, you know, she was quite small. I didn't have a nanny. I didn't have help. I was just flowing around her constantly, right? I didn't really have systems, automations, any of that in place. And that's what served me in that phase of my life. So 2 critical things that I mentioned here or point towards are your values and your energy, right? So your energy will shift throughout the different phases in your life, right? Your values usually stay the same, but of course they can change as well, right? So like with the situation with the baby, my energy levels totally shifted because I didn't get any sleep. I was dedicating most of my energy to this little human being, right? And I mean, my values, I predefined them already. So the value was there that the baby was the priority, right? And that I wanted to have freedom around the baby to do things however I wanted to. So I would invite you to redefine success in a way that it fits with your values and with your current energy levels, right? So a lot of the time people associate the word success with like this big thing in their mind, like it's this big thing that I have to work towards, right? So the way that I see success is really just living in alignment with your values, gaining fulfillment from that. So ultimately you can tap into success at any moment, at any point in your life, right? However, what I do want to say is that it is important to, of course, like work towards a vision, right? So like, let's say now you're just starting your business, but you have this vision of this, let's say, thriving business, right? That's constantly bringing in clients, right? How do we get from point A to point Z, let's say, right? And it really is through consistently listening to, as I mentioned, those like intuitive impulses that come up and taking the steps one at a time. So having in mind that vision, but not attaching yourself too much to it. Because when we do that, we put that big vision front and center and we pedestal it. So anything else feels like we're below that vision. And it feels like it's so far and out of reach that we can't get there, right? Which is why with this feminine approach, with following your intuition, you realize that actually your intuition is kind of like a flashlight. And the flashlight shows you the next 1, 2, maximum 3 steps. It like shines the light onto those steps, and it is your job to fearlessly follow that next step. And once you jump onto that next little rock, you'll see the next one appear. And once you jump onto the next one, you'll see the next one appear. And while you're doing that, you can visualize, that big image and know that just visualizing it and letting go is enough for your intuition to guide you there.